Next, we're going to talk about static view cameras, and this is an additional camera which we can switch to when the presenter approaches a certain zone, perfect for whiteboard areas, particularly in higher education environments. Let's give a quick demonstration. So let's say I'm teaching in some kind of hybrid learning environment, and I've got students over here in the room with me, and I've also got people joining me from the far end. Now I've got a whiteboard that I want to use as part of this teaching, and I'm going to walk over to it and maybe I want to write something on it or just draw attention to it. But straight away you can see that there's two problems. One of them is that the board is a digital whiteboard, and the way the brightness is set up means it's quite bright considering that the camera is exposed for me. But also, as I move out of the way to let everybody see what's on the board, of course the camera is tracking me. So people in the room can see it fine, but not so much for people on the far end. So now I've added our static view camera, and let me show you the difference. This time, as I approach the whiteboard, we're actually going to switch to a dedicated static view camera which is exposed perfectly for the whiteboard. You can see that I'm now kind of dark, but that's because the camera is exposed perfectly for the brightness of this interactive whiteboard. It also means that I can move out of the way, make sure everybody can see it, and of course this camera is not tracking me. However, we are still being tracked by the tracking camera, and you'll see as I leave this zone, we switch back to our tracking camera, which was tracking me the whole time.
Our first job when setting up a second camera is to add our camera to Q-SYS Designer. Here I'm using an NC12X80, so I'm going to add that into the schematic and name it according to the name of the camera on the network. Let's also make sure we've got enough inputs on our MediaCast router and connect the new camera to the router. Next, let's return to the Seervision plugin properties. Here we can see we've got a property for the number of static cameras. Let's change this to 1, open up the plugin, and we can see that there's a new page for static cameras. The plugin is going to control the Q-SYS camera directly, and from here we can save and recall position containers, and later on we'll be linking those to trigger events on the tracking cameras page. But if we try to link it to our new camera now, we can see that it doesn't work. We've also got these MCR input and output controls, which don't work either. And if we go to the tracking cameras page, we can see there's also an MCR input and output control there, which again doesn't seem usable at the moment. Well, that's because in this context, MCR doesn't stand for your favourite naughties emo band. It stands for MediaCast Router, because of course the plugin needs to control the router and control the new camera. And it's going to control these components via their code name. Now, just a quick refresher, the code name is a property of every Q-SYS component, which allows for scripts, plugins, and third-party control systems to change all of the component's controls. You can see it in grey text when you hover your mouse over any component, but you can also find it in the properties for the component under Script Access. So that the plugin can access these components, let's give them a meaningful code name and change the Script Access property from None to Script, or All. Do the same for the newly added camera as well. When you're ready, emulate the design so we can change the controls in the plugin. Now with our code names added, the first thing we can do is choose our camera router via its code name on the MediaCast router controls page. We'll learn more about this page later on. Next, come back to the static view cameras page and choose the correct camera. We can also tell the plugin what MediaCast router input the camera is connected to and what output we want to use for switching. Let's do the same on the tracking cameras page as well. And now the Seervision plugin is set up to control our static view camera and to control the switching via the MediaCast router.
Alright, now we're done linking those components in Q-SYS. What's next is to create a trigger zone in Seervision to activate that whiteboard shot.
Now we want to switch to the static view camera when someone approaches the whiteboard, so let's set up a trigger zone in Seervision to detect that. I'm just going to move the camera over here so we can see the whole of the whiteboard, add a trigger zone and adjust it accordingly. Back in Q-SYS, we need to point the camera where we want it and save that as a position container in the Seervision plugin. This looks good. Now, one of the benefits of a dedicated whiteboard camera is we can also adjust the exposure manually to give us the best image possible. You can set the exposure and the white balance manually and play around with the sharpness and contrast to make sure that the image is perfect for your whiteboard. Looks nice. Now we've set up that camera position, we can save that on the static cameras page in the plugin. Just hit save and change the container name to something meaningful like whiteboard. Setting up the trigger zone to switch to that whiteboard view is now going to be really straightforward. Just choose the trigger zone as we did previously, but instead of calling a container for the tracking camera, we're going to recall that position container on the static view camera. Just select camera 2 in this column and then choose the container we saved earlier. Make sure you press the video auto switch button for these events. This means the camera won't just move, but we'll also switch to that camera after the move is completed. Lastly, we need to do a different action when the presenter leaves the whiteboard zone. To do this, select the same zone in the next row, but choose the leave event instead of the entered event. For this event, we're also going to have a look at the persons column. This column lets you choose the number of people who are left in the zone after the event has occurred. So in this case, we're going to choose 0 because we're looking out for events where someone leaves the whiteboard zone and there are no people remaining. When this happens, we want to switch back to our tracking camera. But because our camera shouldn't have stopped tracking throughout this whole process, we don't necessarily want to recall a container. We can leave the container controls set to none, press our video auto switch button, and the plugin will simply switch back to the tracking camera. Let's give it a test. So here's the start of a very important presentation. We can see that tracking starts as our presenter enters the trigger zone, and now they're making their way over to the whiteboard while talking about something very interesting, presumably. Now when our presenter enters that whiteboard trigger zone, we can see that the camera switches to that static view camera. Notice that there's been no change at all on the tracking camera. It's still following our presenter. We've just switched to the static camera in Q-SYS. Now as our presenter leaves that whiteboard trigger zone, we switch back to the tracking camera. Simple as that.
Good job, you've got static view cameras working. Now, what if we want to do something different when there are multiple presenters on stage? Well, for that we're going to need a different type of camera, and we'll cover that in the next part of the training. See you there.